Elias Thorne sat in the cramped, dimly lit cockpit of the Nereus II, his breath visible in the chilled air. He wasn't supposed to be here. A year ago, his credentials had been stripped, his reputation shredded by a community that called his obsession a dangerous madness. But Elias knew the truth was buried 7 miles down, beneath the mercy of the surface. His hands, calloused and steady, gripped the controls as he guided the submersible into the yawning maw of the Pacific. This was his final descent, a rogue mission into the Mariana Trench to find what remained of the Aegis, the vessel that had swallowed his father whole years before. As the gauge ticked past 1,000 meters, the twilight zone greeted him with its suffocating indigo embrace. Here, the sun's reach finally failed, leaving behind a world of perpetual dusk. The pressure was no longer just a reading on a screen, it was a physical weight that seemed to squeeze the oxygen from his lungs. The titanium hull groaned, a deep metallic protest against the millions of tons of water pressing inward. Every creak felt like a heartbeat, a reminder that only a few inches of metal stood between him and instant death. Elias watched the particles of marine snow drift upward like falling stars in a dead sky. Suddenly, the floodlights caught a flash of movement. From the gloom emerged a nightmare of prehistoric design, the frilled shark. It moved with a sickening serpentine grace, its body undulating like a snake through the water. As it drifted past the porthole, it bared its rows of 300 needle-like teeth, arranged in jagged clusters. It was a living fossil, a creature that had survived 5 mass extinctions by hiding in the dark. Looking into its black, lifeless eyes, Elias felt a primal shiver. In the deep, time didn't just slow down. It stood perfectly still, guarding ancient secrets that humanity was never meant to uncover. He descended further, reaching the desolate seabed where the shadows grew more distorted. There, the lights illuminated a gruesome scene on the floor. A massive whale carcass lay half buried in the silt, a fallen titan of the upper world being reclaimed by the abyss. Crawling over the decaying flesh were giant isopods, scavengers the size of small dogs. Their segmented pale carapaces glinted as they tore through the remains with mechanical precision. Elias felt a profound sense of isolation. To these creatures, he wasn't a hero. He was nothing but potential sustenance, another ghost passing through a realm of eternal hunger. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Floating just above the silt, a smaller but more grotesque figure appeared, the black swallower. Its distended, transparent stomach hung low, containing a prey fish 10 times its own size. It was a visual manifestation of the abyss itself, a void that would consume anything, no matter how large or ambitious. For Elias, the sight was a mirror to his soul. He had spent his life trying to swallow a grief larger than his heart could hold, and now, like the fish, he risked being torn apart by his own obsession. A sudden, sharp ping echoed through the cabin. A warning light flickered amber. A minor hull breach had sent a fine spray of freezing mist into the air. The pressure was finding the cracks. Elias knew he was past the point of no return. To ascend now would be failure. To continue was a gamble with death. He ignored the alarm, his eyes fixed on the sonar. Suddenly, a massive, unidentified shadow swept across the screen. It was colossal, far larger than any known creature. Then the silence was shattered by a burst of static. Through the white noise, a voice emerged, faint and impossible. It was his father's voice, whispering through the hydrophones, a ghostly echo from the bottom of the world, beckoning him deeper into the dark. The spectral voice of his father still vibrated in Elias's ears, a haunting melody that defied the laws of physics and the finality of death. He gripped the joysticks of the Nereus II, his knuckles white. Ahead, a rhythmic, pulsing light flickered through the silt-heavy water. It was a warm, inviting glow. For a heartbeat, hope flared in his chest. Perhaps a rescue beacon, or the Aegis itself, still powered by some miracle of engineering. He pushed the thrusters forward, drawn to the luminescence like a moth to a flame. But as the gap closed, the light revealed its true, hideous nature. It wasn't a beacon, it was a fleshy bulb dangling from the forehead of a nightmare. The anglerfish hovered in the gloom, its mouth a cavern of translucent needle-thin teeth that curved inward. It was an evolution of deceit, using the abyss's lack of light as a lure. Elias yanked the controls back, a cold sweat breaking across his brow. He had almost been seduced by a lie, a reminder that in this crushing dark, even hope could be a weapon. Before he could steady his breathing, a shadow detached itself from the darkness above. A pale, pinkish shape lunged with terrifying speed. It was a goblin shark, a relic of a forgotten era. As it struck, its jaw did something impossible. The entire mouth thrust forward, detached from its skull, snapping shut against the sub's external camera mount. The sound was a sickening metallic crunch that echoed through the cabin. The monitor in the cockpit flickered as the external lens shattered, leaving Elias with a distorted, spider-webbed view of the abyss. The shark retreated into the black, leaving behind a deep gouge in the titanium housing. The Nereus too felt smaller now, its armor compromised, its eyes half-blinded. The vulnerability was now a tangible ache. He drifted lower, the silence returning, heavy and judgmental. A barrel-eye fish floated past his porthole, its body a ghostly silver, but its head froze Elias's blood. The creature's skull was a transparent, fluid-filled dome, revealing two glowing green orbs, its eyes pointing directly upward. It didn't look at the world, it looked through it. Elias felt a profound sense of being scrutinized, not by a fish, but by the ocean itself. Those upward-staring eyes seemed to pierce through the hull of the Nereus II, judging the intruder who dared to disturb the ancient silence of the deep. He wasn't the hunter here. He was merely a specimen under a microscope, a flicker of brief, noisy life in an eternal graveyard. The seabed finally rose to meet him, but it wasn't the pristine alien landscape he had imagined. As the floodlights swept over the trenches, they illuminated a rusted candy wrapper and a shredded plastic bag, partially buried in the ancient sediment. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Even here, at the literal end of the world, where the pressure could crush a tank, the poison of humanity had arrived first. It was a plastic graveyard, a testament to a species that destroyed what it couldn't even reach. This wasn't a discovery. It was a crime scene. The sight filled him with a bitter, hollow grief. Then, the sonar emitted a steady, rhythmic pulse. A massive metallic silhouette loomed out of the darkness. The Aegis. Elias's heart hammered against his ribs. He steered toward the wreckage, expecting to see a hull flattened by the weight of the water. Instead, he found a massacre. The Aegis had been torn open from the outside, the thick steel plating peeled back like the skin of a fruit. There were no signs of implosion, only the jagged marks of something with unimaginable strength. He maneuvered the sub's robotic arm toward the shattered bridge, finding the emergency logbook lodged in a crevice. He brought it close to the porthole, the internal light illuminating his father's final handwritten entry. The ink was smeared, but the words were clear. "It doesn't want us to leave." Just as the horror of the sentence took hold, a low-frequency hum resonated through the hull. Every light in the Nereus II flickered once, twice, and then plunged into absolute terrifying darkness, leaving Elias alone with the thing in the dark. In the suffocating blackness, Elias felt the Nereus II shudder. The silence broke with a wet, heavy thud against the reinforced porthole. He fumbled for emergency chemical flares, his hands trembling in the freezing air. As one ignited, a brilliant crimson light flooded the void. It revealed an eye. A dinner plate-sized orb of cold intelligence stared back at him. It belonged to a colossal squid, its skin a bruised red, pulsing with bioluminescent aggression. Massive suction cups, rimmed with serrated teeth, slammed against the hull, testing the structural integrity of his tiny sanctuary. The beast wasn't just a hunter, it was a sentinel. Its thick, muscular tentacles coiled around the sub's hull, leaving circular welts on the reinforced titanium. Elias realized the squid was merely a scavenger compared to the ancient, gargantuan shadow lurking further out in the dark. A sound rippled through the water, a low-frequency vibration so powerful it bypassed his ears and hummed directly in his marrow. It was the bloop, a sound recorded decades ago and dismissed by scientists as shifting ice. But here, at the bottom of the world, Elias felt its biological source. It was a rhythmic, guttural vocalization that defied known anatomy. It was a sound of tectonic scale, a groaning of the Earth's crust that carried a terrifying sentient intent. Something massive was waking up, stirred by the intrusion of his sub and the echoes of the Aegis. The vibrations rattled the instruments, shaking the very foundation of the trench itself. The terror his father had warned about wasn't a single predator, but an ancient breathing consciousness that viewed the surface world as a virus. Driven by the rhythmic shockwaves, Elias drifted toward a surreal sight, an underwater lake. The brine pool shimmered with a toxic, oily sheen, a pocket of hypersaline water so dense it sat separate from the ocean. It looked like a sheet of midnight glass, reflecting the sub's dying lights in a distorted, shimmering dance. Along its shores lay a graveyard of the deep. He saw the preserved carcasses of creatures that had wandered into the salt, their bodies held in a state of eternal, pickled stasis. It was a museum of failures. Amidst the ghostly remains, he saw pieces of the Aegis's landing gear. This was the end. The brine pool was a boundary, a dead zone where the ocean's laws of decay were suspended. It was here that he finally understood the core of his father's sacrifice. The sonar pings returned faster now. The entity was circling, its massive bulk displacing enough water to tilt the Nereus II. Elias looked at the robotic arm, hovering over a storage container from his father's ship. But his power reserves were critical. He had enough energy for one final action. He could either retrieve the container or initiate a high-decibel sonar burst to distract the entity. One choice offered personal closure. The other offered a chance to warn the world. He remembered the logbook. His father hadn't been trapped. He had stayed by choice. The Aegis was a lure, a stationary beacon designed to keep the entity's focus deep within the trench, preventing it from following the noise of human industry to the surface. With a heavy heart, Elias diverted all remaining battery power to the communications array. He didn't reach for the container. Instead, he initiated a massive data dump, transmitting every photograph, every sonar reading, and the final logs of the Aegis to the surface relay buoys. The sonar pulse blasted outward, a piercing scream in the deep that momentarily stunned the circling Titan. The momentum of the energy release sent the sub into a slow, unpowered ascent. He felt the gravity shift as the sub bobbed like a cork in a storm, disconnected from the weight of his mission. Elias leaned back, watching the wreckage and the brine pool fade into the gloom. He was floating toward a world that would never truly understand the price of its ignorance. Days later, the sunlight on the deck of the rescue ship felt alien and too bright. He was a man out of time, changed forever by the crushing weight of the secrets he carried. He looked at the rolling blue waves of the Pacific, knowing the true terrors weren't myths. They were the sentinels of a world that didn't want to be found. Below deck, the technicians were busy decoding his transmission. They noticed a strange anomaly in the recording. The low-frequency vibration wasn't fading, it was shifting, mimicking the exact frequency of his data signal. The sound was rising through the water column, trailing the information like a scent. The entity wasn't staying in the trench anymore. It was coming up. The transmission had succeeded, but the ocean always demanded a final tally.